Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Omer, and as always, I'm joined by super producer and Metro transit enthusiast, Chicago's favorite forgotten son, Marcus the Web Webster. Marcus, how you doing, man?
I am doing pretty good out here.
All right, that's good. Marcus, welcome to our 10th episode, by the way. 10 episodes in to the Humor Q show. We've only dealt with a handful of technical difficulties, and we have learned a lot, Marcus, have we not?
Absolutely, and or before the show, don't want to tease it, kind of want to tease it. Maybe we'll do something live after this COVID stuff. Find out right after this. Well, it's gonna be a minute because
Well,
COVID.
well, here. You guys want a little bit of a tease right here. We're definitely gonna be doing something live this year. I guarantee more live episodes this year, in person interviews with potential audiences. Again, potential, but we'll talk about that more later. Today on tap, we've got a fantastic show planned for you. We're going to be talking about the length and we're going to be talking about the decision by the Nevada Democratic Party staff to quit their jobs after members of the DSA were elected to state leadership seats. And we're going to talk about what happened with that, what went down, and if the Nevada model can be applied to other states. We're also going to be talking about global politics. We're going to talk about the former president of Brazil, Lula da Silva, being cleared of the false charges put against him of corruption, and now being able to run against the fascist Bolsonaro in Brazil, and what his return means for left-wing movements globally. And Pope Francis recently took a trip to Iraq with meeting with Christian, Sunni, Shia leaders, all alike, to discuss interfaith dialogue and show remorse for the 2003 invasion of Iraq and the terrifying reality it yielded for many Iraqis. All this, much more coming up on the Omer Q show. But before we begin, do me a little favor, hit that like button, that notification bell down below, hit that as well. And be sure to subscribe for new videos. We're going to be doing some new videos, new content. Got a bunch of ideas. Just be sure to watch. Check them out. Happy Saturday, everyone. And we're going to kick things off today with a bit of a Cuomo update. So for those who don't know, we talked about this about 2 weeks ago. Andrew Cuomo, current governor, rather, of the not-so-great state of New York, stated that was actually implicated in a corruption scandal. And the scandal stemmed from this report that he hid and underreported numbers of deaths from nursing homes during the first early parts of the COVID pandemic. And later he was also noted in a scandal for sexual harassment. We now have 6 women who have come forward, an extra 3 this week, who've come forward and given credible and at length and detailed allegations of sexual assault or sexual harassment against the governor. This has made progressives and moderate Democrats alike come and ridicule and call for Andrew Cuomo to resign. We had AOC and Jamal Bowman come out and say that Andrew Cuomo must resign. We also had U.S. senators from New York, Kirsten Gillibrand, as well as Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, come out and say that Andrew Cuomo has lost the vote of confidence in the party. He's lost confidence amongst the government and all the different bodies in the government, and for that reason, he must resign. And Marcus, we talked about the corruption angle of this last time. We talked about how it was like even that action itself was enough for Cuomo to be impeached, was enough for Cuomo to face some sort of legal action. And now this has shifted to a whole different sphere because we're not talking about just 1 or 2 allegations by random people. We are talking about now 6 allegations that have now been backed up by current and former aides of Andrew Cuomo. So this isn't just people coming out from out of the woodwork and political stunts. This is a reality that shows a habitual pattern that developed by Andrew Cuomo, by the administration to do these types of things. And the corruption is just kind of now at this point the cherry on top. So I just want to get your thoughts on this and how do you think this not only affects Cuomo now that all of the major political leaders, including Jerry Nadler, who I failed to mention earlier, have come out from all the progressive and moderate wings of the party and said he must resign.
Well, it's absolutely it's a significant case against him.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was excited about was the fact that AOC could comment on something without the entire internet saying, "Hey, why are you commenting about this? This doesn't affect you." It's like I know this is anecdotal. This is just like a side note, right? But like, how many times has AOC come out and people tell her to be quiet or not talk about this? Biggest example recently was the Texas power crisis. People told her to go away and be quiet, but because they didn't want her talking about this. But this is an issue where she can actually speak, directly to her constituents about something that affects them directly. And I'm excited that she's saying something, and we're not going to have to hear the obligatory Republicans saying, "Why are you not? Why are you interested in that?" But that was a side note. Let's get back onto the main topic. Yeah, Cuomo has some serious issues he needs to account for, especially when we're talking about the COVID numbers. This isn't just something that is, you know, oh, he skewed the numbers and it had no effect on the numbers. He just hid them. No, by hiding the numbers, he made the numbers worse, right? When people are deciding if they want their relatives in nursing homes or if they want them back at home, that's something that they need all of the information on. When you're saying, hey, the nursing homes look pretty safe, right? We're not getting a lot of cases here, and we are getting a lot of cases here. That's something that we definitely need to people need to know so that they could make the right decision when it comes to regards to where their family members stay during this crisis. And looking at the numbers, a lot of people decided that nursing homes were the proper place to keep their relatives, their granddads, their grandpas, their moms, their dads. And they didn't have all the information, and that in itself is something that it's not comprehensible. I don't understand why he would do that besides just political gain. And I was actually
Well,
talking to
that I'm sorry, but that Marcus, that's what it's about at the end of the day. For a lot of these people who've been in politics and political families, that's what it's about. It's about political gain.
absolutely. And I was actually talking to someone today from New York, who was just saying like the Andrew Cuomo and his father, they both come from this like very ritualistic, very you know self-orientated, like corrupt atmosphere, right? And that's something Republicans have been saying all the time, right? But now it's coming from the left, it's coming from the center. Everyone kind of sees who he truly is, and to go around and just flaunt around like with his blanket on and his with his bottle of looks like alcohol to me personally. I don't know I don't know what he's drinking. I don't know what he's thinking, but to just walk around with that, and like there it is, like no, oh, I'm on my phone, I'm walking around, it takes balls, and then you compound with all the sexual assault allegations, you know, that's not great. That's really not good optics. It's not good for him, and if that's what it takes for him to finally resign, I think he should have resigned after the COVID, to be honest. Yeah, that I think was the biggest fault that he committed.
Right.
I mean, I'm one for when sexual assault allegations come out. I like to see them prosecuted. I like to see them in courts of law. I think it's a slippery slope. Just because if you look around, right, when the allegations get thrown out, how many people said Bernie Sanders is sexist, right? You get a couple fake cases on Bernie, and no one likes it when it's their guy who gets thrown with those accusations. But
Right.
so
Right.
I don't like the whole public court of opinion thing. But
Right.
I mean, these seem pretty credible.
Yeah, and
That I'm
the
willing to
thing
say that.
that makes these kind of different, because a lot of the times when a lot of times I think it's, I'm trying to choose my words carefully. A lot of times when you see these things happen, if it's just one isolated incident or one isolated accusation or something like that, that's when I think it's appropriate to let the court of opinion, or not, no, appropriate to kind of let things play out in the judicial sphere and whatnot, and kind of see where the facts and the investigations lead. I think when you have the aides of this governor, when you have people who are close to him, when you have people who used to work for him, all coming out and saying almost the exact same thing, and when you have a governor who is known to be aggressive, who's known to be kind of take what he wants, even in the political sphere, his personal life. These things all together add up to someone who is not, I think, I don't want to say unfit, but that's kind of what I'm trying to say. Like someone who's not fit for this position. And I just want to play just a few sound bites because he let us know that he was quite frankly not going to resign. So let me actually just play one of those.
I'm not
They
going to
don't. They
resign.
can't hear this.
I never harassed anyone.
They
I
can't
never
hear this.
abused
We
anyone.
got. You
I
got. You
never
had to send them to me.
assaulted anyone.
Did you what?
So they can't hear this. They can't hear me, but they can't. You'd have to send them to me.
Wait, I can you.
They can't hear the sound clips.
What do you mean they can't hear the sound clips?
The way OBS says that, they can't hear the sound clips. Okay, I muted you, muted me. They can't hear the sound clips. Like, you'd have to send them to me, so just move on. Just move on. Send them to me, but, like, you want me to talk? No, they can't hear it. No, literally, the way it's set up, they can't hear it. So let's move on. No, okay, I'll explain it later, but let's move on.
All right, cool. All right, well, he basically said that he wasn't going to resign. He said that this cancel culture is coming for him, and that he was not going to take the necessary steps to leave office. He was not going to take the necessary steps to address this. So it's kind of like we're seeing this cultural battle being fought as well, and that's kind of what I wanted to get across in those clips that I wanted to play. But we'll see about that later. Marcus, any final thoughts on Cuomo before we move on?
Nah. So I think the thing is, the biggest thing is he's obfuscating. He's not trying to like take responsibility for what he's done, and that's pretty egregious considering all of the things that he has done. Right? How many people would still be alive? How many people would at least had the information that would help them stay alive? Right? And then when it comes down to the sexual assault allegations, they seem pretty credible. There's a huge pile of allegations. And they're coming from people who would have no interest in seeing Cuomo get hurt, right? They've come from people who are pretty tied to Cuomo's legacy, pretty tied to Cuomo's success, right? They're people who their promotions, their advancement through the political system in New York is tied to being loyal to Cuomo. I think what this is people realizing the man that Cuomo is, the man who he has been, and realizing that even though he's the governor of New York and they might have been associated with him for so long, that the truth does matter. The truth needs to get out, and that he's a bad man, and there's no way he should not win this primary, and he should definitely not remain governor. And that's what the voters get to decide. But politicians in New York also have a responsibility to get him out as soon as possible, whatever means that they decide to do that. It should happen.
Yep. Yep, agreed. And I did check, and it was faint, but they could still hear the audio on the playback. But assuming they can, let me just play one more time what he said.
I'm not going to resign. I never harassed anyone. I never abused anyone. I never assaulted anyone. And I never would. I'm not.
So. We're gonna let the governor word speak for himself. That's what he has to say on this, and I guess we're gonna see how this plays out. I'm assuming he's going to end up having to resign because he's lost so much political capital at this point. But we'll see about that. Before we move on to our next subject, though, I do want to remind anyone who's watching to hit that like button, subscribe, notification bell below. Hit that as well. Patreon.com/OQ Politics. Also for exclusive content videos, more readings I'm going to be doing on there. So be sure to check those out as well. So moving on. I wanted to talk a little bit about the global landscape today. And part of that, what I wanted to talk about was Pope Francis. Now, Pope Francis made his first international trip since the pandemic began last year. And for this historic trip in his papacy, he chose to go to Iraq. Now, many see Iraq today to be a Muslim country, majority Muslim country ruled by Sunnis and Shias. But in reality, it's also one of the most historic and oldest Christian civilizations there was. That's where a lot of the early Christian civilizations were. That's where a lot of early Christians were. So that's also played into a part of why he went there. Now, he insisted on taking this trip because he feels the pain and sufferings that these people have gone through. And while obviously he met with Iraqi Christians, and the people Francis was referring to, though, when he was talking about the people who are suffering, he was talking about people of all backgrounds, whether they were Christian, Sunni, Shia, regardless. And it kind of contradicts a lot of the historic elements of the end relationship that the papacy has had with Islam. Because historically, there's this nihilistic view that Christianity and Islam are constantly locked in a battle of civilizations. And this idea goes back to the Crusades. And this trip really undercut, more so than any other pope and their trips, that notion. Because Pope Francis, throughout his papacy, has made it almost a mandate in his own right that he wants to kind of fix the image of the papacy and the relationship of the papacy with interfaith leaders, with the people and the Christians and the Catholics that followed him. So, and he's done that in many different ways. One of the ways he's done it is by creating a dialogue. He's created a dialogue so Vatican leaders can speak to Islamic leaders, as you're seeing right here. He spoke to a Shia leader in Iraq while he was there, one that actually shut out the U.S. government and who holds a lot of religious power in Iraq. This religious leader shut out the U.S. government when he is not known to talk to public figures, but he talked to the Pope. And it's important for us to understand why that is. He spoke with the Pope because what popes and imams or popes and rabbis or any religious or spiritual leaders can do is they speak on a spiritual and a humanistic level. And it's not strictly a transactional approach because governments tend to think of these things as transactions. Oh, I'm going to talk to this religious leader and, we're automatically going to get what we want, what's in our best interest. But it's not, but sometimes that what's in the best interest for those people, like those parties, is not what's in the best interest of the people who live there. And Pope Francis, like I said, has kind of mended a lot of fences. One of the biggest examples is Sheikh Ahmad al-Taib. He went to this cleric in Cairo, and there was a falling out between the previous pope and this imam. And what Francis did was Francis went out there, he heard him out, and he opened that dialogue back up. So, and a lot of people, they Marcus, they like to kind of say that, oh my God, these religious leaders, and a lot of people on the left especially, they like to discredit the what religion can offer people, because they see it as strictly as, oh well, religion is silly. And you can have that opinion. That's not a bad thing. But I do think that there is some worth to this idea that religious leaders like Pope Francis, who has been known to kind of step up for the common people and step up more so and kind of reach out for this truth and reconciliation more so than other leaders have. I think what he's shown is that there is this other part of religion that's not just, trying to indoctrinate people. That's not just trying to push a religion on, but it's something deeper, and that is a human level connection for peace, a human level connection for justice.
Absolutely.
I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. And there is a minority of Christians in Iraq who I think it's very important that they have the representation of the Pope. It's good for the Pope to come and speak to that minority. Also, when you look at it, right, the Pope historically is a head of state. He's the leader of a small but powerful area, a piece of land, actually. But besides that piece of land, he speaks as the head of millions of people across the world, billions of people, actually. And it matters what he says. Most of the countries that invaded Iraq were Christian countries, right? And the Vatican actually, they didn't support necessarily the war, but they didn't come out against it as
Right.
hard as, in hindsight, they should have, right? Like now, when you see it, right, it's easy to say, hey, millions of people died unnecessarily because of the consequences of this war. And there were no weapons of mass destruction. That's easy to see now. And I think that definitely the Vatican has learned something from that. They won't blindly follow what the U.S. says and blindly follow the U.S. into war. I think a lot of countries around the world have learned that lesson. But when you look at it, the Vatican is reaching out and saying, hey, on behalf of Christian nations, which pretty much decimated your country, right? You
Yeah.
know, pretty much just came in, did whatever the heck they wanted to, and left. We take responsibility for the mistakes that we made in this venture, and I don't think that their responsibility level is all too high. I think really they had the responsibility to stop the intervention, but they didn't do that, and I think that's what he really was culpable for,
Mm-hmm.
or at least the Catholic Church was culpable for, because he
Yeah.
wasn't the leader at the point. But I think
Yeah.
that's a huge olive branch, and I think it helps out the minority Christians in Iraq to have a leader who's willing to come out and say that, right? I think that'll heal the divides between the majority and the minority when it comes to religious beliefs. Hopefully that will make sure that there's a better relations between the minority and majority, which I wouldn't say are great at the time of his coming.
Right. Yeah, no, especially after what's happened in just recent years, the past decade with ISIL and the just brutal war zone that Iraq and Syria have become. And you kind of hinted at this, and I'm glad you did, because there was another theme of the Pope's visit, and that was kind of not just acknowledging the pain and suffering of Iraqis, but acknowledging the origin of that pain and what happened. Pope Francis's trip was in part to mend old fences and build a dialogue, but it was also signifying the first, like this is the first of its kind. Pope Francis now becomes the most powerful public figure in the West so far to admit that the war in Iraq was a mistake, call out the bloodshed it caused, acknowledge the instability it unleashed on the Iraqi people and the government, and more so on the people, Sunnis, Shias, Christians, mothers, fathers, sons, people, Marcus. Like, this is we haven't even seen this type of apology. We haven't seen this type of rhetoric come out from our public figures, from our president, our current president. That even they haven't taken the accountability as far as Pope Francis at this point has. And Pope Francis just said, and he said the truth, that the Iraq war was wrong and it led to the terrible state that Iraq is in now, and the suffering that the people are enduring right now is a direct cause of that unjust war. And that's what I think makes Francis different from a lot of his predecessors, because we've seen, especially we came off of Benedict, right? Benedict was a quiet pope. He kind of was an old guard of the papacy, and while he didn't have those public, PR moments of making public statements on things, he kind of just did the average, like what you're expected to do in the papacy. Just kind of go through the motions, act like a holy leader. He didn't interfere in politics that much. And, the comparisons when you're talking about a pope coming out and acknowledging suffering and acknowledging wrong. The biggest example everyone's probably going to go to is that of Pope Pius XII. And for those who don't know, Pope Pius XII was the pope during World War II. He was aware of a lot of the things that were going on, a lot of the brutal the killings that were going on at the hands of the Germans against the Jews and other minorities. And a lot of people say that the papacy and Pius didn't react and didn't publicize this enough and didn't come out enough against it. So I think we're seeing Francis kind of evolve the papacy a little bit. And hopefully, I think this sets a precedent for future popes to publicly say when things are wrong and right. And like one of the questions I have coming out of this is, like is this more effective, do you think? Sometimes, is this kind of diplomacy that Francis does, which is kind of like a spiritual, person to person public diplomacy. I feel like in some way it's way more effective than the regime building that the U.S. tries to do every few years. So I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I think the power of the Pope is, especially now, is very, very different than it has ever been, and it's different than nation states, right? So the Pope, the Pope, uh, going back to your pious comparison, I think that the two different scenarios are completely, vastly different. Back when in World War II, Pius had to make the decision: do I anger the Nazis, who have taken Poland, who have taken Germany, who have taken over most of Europe? Right? There's a lot of Catholic priests. There's a lot of Catholics in that area. So the decision Pius had to make was, how much do I press the Nazis, knowing that if I go too far, thousands of Catholics, if not millions, die. Right? If Pius went further, the Holocaust might not be just Jews. It could have been. It could have completely been Catholics, depending on how far Pius went.
Right.
And I think that's a very important distinction, because
Yeah. No, that is.
in this modern problem, right? It would have cost Pope Benedict, or well, at the time it was Pope John Paul II, right?
Yeah.
Because he was
2003 was John Paul II, and John Paul II. It's probably important to note that he was outspoken on one issue specifically, and that was he was very anti-communist because of where he grew up. So that's one thing he did speak out against. But again, I'm sorry, I will let you finish. But it's this kind of thing. Pius was obviously the big example I think that everyone brings up, but it's this kind of what I was talking about is there seems to be Francis more so than past popes seems to understand the power that he has as the Pope and use it no matter how it's going to affect, the politicians or the heads of states of other countries. He's very outspoken on a lot of things.
Absolutely. And I think getting back to the Iraq conflict, Pope John Paul II and even Pope Benedict, right? It would have cost them nothing to speak out against what was happening, right? It would have cost them nothing to say, hey, America, you're going too far, right? Or you didn't find weapons of mass destruction. Let the Iraqi people rebuild on their own, right? It would have cost them nothing to do those actions or say those words, right? But for the most part, they didn't, right? And I think that's what Francis has to atone for. And then also, there's a sizable population of Christians in Iraq, and I think that, it's the Pope's place to worry about that population, right? Do what's best for that population. But also, there's been a trend of popes not intervening in the Middle East, right? There will occasionally be something said about Israel and the Palestinians. But besides that, popes have done a hands-off approach to the rest of the Middle East. And there's a lot of minority Christians out there, right, in the Middle East. And I think it's good to see that the Pope is actually willing to go to the Middle East and solve these, get involved in these problems to try to solve these problems, right? And there's going to be a decision, I hate to bring it up, but, the popes are generally old people, right? And there's a backlash between conservative Catholics and liberal Catholics every time there's a new pope, John Paul II, very, very left-leaning, I'd say, in a lot of regards. There's definitely the communism thing that's going on, but in a lot of, when it comes to doctrine, right, he was pretty liberal with changing the doctrine towards evolving the church. You got Benedict to swing that back, pendulum to the right. To this day, I wonder why he resigned effectively over continuing. I think that has something to do with the fact that he was more right-leaning, and that's not what the church needed at the time. And now we have Francis, who's more left-leaning than Pope John Paul II. And I think if the Catholic Church wants to maintain power, it's definitely going to have to keep installing popes who are more left-leaning and involving the church.
Right, and I think what Francis has done, and it's a very good thing, and we can say left or right. I think the whole Francis doctrine of the papacy, what it has done is it has allowed the popes now to acknowledge past mistakes conducted by the church. Because, let's be honest, John Paul II knew, quite frankly, what was happening with children and priests. The church was well aware of what was happening globally, and unfortunately, steps were not taken to, counteract that. But what Francis has done, whether it be the sex abuse scandals, whether it's now the Iraq War, or whether it's been the mistreatment of refugees or immigrants. This man went to the U.S. Congress. He said in a joint session of Congress and he essentially admonished the idea that the United States would not accept immigrants who were fleeing terror, who were fleeing warfare. And he's talked about all these different things that seem left, and like like we'll finish up and get to a break, but I do want to make this point. All of these ideas, it's easy to say that they're left, but at what point do we say these are coming from a pope? At what point do we start to think, maybe there's a reason why someone as grounded in religious belief as Francis, maybe there's a reason why someone who is as grounded as a person like Francis believes these things. Maybe it's not just because they're left ideas. Maybe all these people, all these crazy liberals, all these leftists don't believe all these ideas just because they're left ideas. Maybe they're actually good ideas. And I think that's the messaging, that's the disconnect that always happens with these left-leaning policies. People, like, we have the center right and the right whatever, all saying that, oh, these ideas are extreme policies, when in reality these are just human-based policies. They're not that different from, or they're not that extreme. But again, it always comes down to messaging. But the work that Pope Francis is doing is obviously extremely important, and we're huge fans of him, and the Truth and Reconciliation will continue under Francis. But
Absolutely.
I know we got to get to a break, so we'll do that. We'll be back talking about Lula and his return and what that means for Brazil's presidential elections, as well as the big scandal for the Democratic Party out of Nevada. All that and more coming up on the Omer Q Show. We'll be back after a break.
And we're live.
Hey guys, welcome back. We are back here on the Omer Q Show. Remember to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. Ask some questions in the chat if you want. If you want to, let the conversation keep going. So guys, I wanted to start off with this second segment. I also want to introduce. I'm sorry about this. I forgot to. Dwayne Paul Murphy is joining us, political organizer and Democratic Socialist from California. Dwayne Paul Murphy is joining us. Dwayne, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Thank you for having me again.
Well, it's good to have you, my friend. And I'm glad I have you to talk about this because we're in this next segment. We're going to talk about two very important things about left-wing movements, and then two very big news pieces about left-wing movements. So, in the news this week, we found out that Lula da Silva, aka Lula, who is the former president of Brazil, was cleared of all the charges of corruption against him. And let me just give some background for people who might not be familiar, and then I'll get to why this is important later. So Lula is a former union leader who served as Brazil's president from 2003 to 2010. He was very popular. He expanded a lot of popular welfare programs, took advantage of the global market at the time, which was really booming, and helped Brazil out a lot and helped the Brazilian workers. And he became the face of the global left-wing movement and this kind of new left-wing movement that arose. And we can say that the Bernie Sanders movement kind of was pushed globally as well with the help of Lula and people like him. So, and he was kind of living proof to, I think, the West that left-wing populists can exist and can have power without being communist, you know. So that's what made Lula, I think, so revolutionary and so important. And he was also arguably the most popular president in Brazil's entire history. And he governed with the understanding of the issues that affected working class people. And up until then, a lot of the policies that Brazil had put out were impacting working class people negatively, and Lula spoke to that, and he addressed it in a way that no one else had previously. And after he left office, his successor took over, and she was kind of his protege. And what happened was she was accused of corruption, mismanaging government funds, taking kickbacks from organizations and companies, and it kind of ruined both the party's image and her image, and she was impeached. Now, through this, many leaders of Brazil's establishment saw this as an opportunity to kind of sweep Lula in with this hysteria, and we saw him follow a similar fate. They saw this as a way for not just to ruin Lula's chances for running for re-election, which at the time he was planning to do, but also quell this new left-wing movement in Brazil. And the policies were still popular up at that point, but what was more unpopular at that point was corruption, because the Brazilian people were sick of it. So they brought up charges against him. He was convicted of 2 counts of corruption and money laundering on highly questionable charges. And the established class that was the ruling class in Brazil kind of helped push these charges through. And it was alleged that he was receiving money for home improvements on a beachfront apartment that he had never lived in. So again, these are weak charges against the guy. Convicted in 2016, he was, and he served 2 years in prison on these charges. And this week, and I just want to, before we bring in Dwayne, I want to just say that, you know, this is the reason that I kind of am very vocal about my distrust of, the establishment. And this isn't just, the U.S. establishment. This is a global establishment we're talking about, Dwayne, because they will do whatever they can to root out things that are bad for them, but might be best for the vast majority of working and people in the country as a whole. So before we'll talk a little bit about Lula and what happened with him and now what's developed, but I do want to get your thoughts on just the quelling of left-wing movements and why the left is always kind of the target of these attacks.
Well, it's not a surprise that the political and overall establishment in Brazil wanted to take down Lula da Silva and the Workers' Party for years, and they were trying to find all these opportunities. Now, don't get me wrong, there are legitimate cases and instances of corruption, as we saw in Operation Car Wash. They said this is one of the biggest investigations since Watergate, since Iran-Contra, and all these other scandals that have occurred in the Americas. But let's also not forget that Jair Bolsonaro, the Trump of the tropics, his son is being investigated for corruption. There are allegations that Bolsonaro, before he became president, had some sort of connection with the death of a socialist feminist politician, Maria Franco. This has happened to both the political left, right, and center, but they took down Lula and his successor, Dilma Rousseff, over nonsensical allegations. And for Dilma Rousseff, she was basically impeached over an accounting issue.
Yeah.
When the economy was stagnated or sluggish or on the verge of a recession, because when the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009 hit, Brazil wasn't seriously impacted as much of Europe and the United States was. And so, these are very positive developments with, Lula's legal situations. And, there is a strong possibility, because apparently if he's being cleared by the Supreme Court of Brazil, the highest court in the country, there's a strong possibility he might run for president or be vice president with a Workers' Party candidate against Jair Bolsonaro.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because, what I left out in my opening bit was the fact that, like, when this went down, when Lula was imprisoned wrongfully, and he was essentially a political prisoner at this point, what happened was he automatically became ineligible to run in the presidential election. And in 2018, he was actually leading polls, even though he wasn't eligible to run. And what happened was, Brazil essentially became governed by Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro won that election. And, let me just talk a little bit about Bolsonaro for those who might not know. He's a self-proclaimed right-wing populist. Basically, he models himself after people like Donald Trump or Viktor Orban in Hungary. And, he's used his outsider status to give him this, quote, anti-corruption rhetoric, some legitimacy, in the same vein as Trump did, in a very similar way that Viktor Orban has done. And, like, Dwayne, let me just see, does any of this sound familiar? These are the things that Bolsonaro has said and had done in the past few years. So he downplayed the COVID-19 pandemic, and it led to large spikes and hundreds of thousands of people dying. Sound familiar, that one? He discredited the science of climate change, which, by the way, affects his country a lot, considering the Amazon rainforest sits in his country. He's pulled out of climate deals. He has a base of supporters that represents 30 to 40% of his country who stick by him no matter what he says, including these terrible gaffes where he says, like, people like Africans are the reasons why Brazilians are struggling economically. Like, all of this stuff, it's literally right out of the new right-wing populist playbook. Orban plays by the same rules. The AfD in Germany plays by the same rule book. Trump obviously brought this to light. And what we've seen in the past few years is this rise in right-wing populism that is extremely dangerous, because what it's doing is it's giving people an alternative to the new left. And what Lula and this new ruling that I haven't talked about yet, and why this is important, is, like, just a few days ago, Lula was acquitted, essentially. A few days ago, the Brazilian Supreme Court ruled that, he was in fact eligible to run in the 2022 election, and that all the charges against him were annulled. That's a big win for the left. After years of being a political prisoner, he's now not only free, but he's now able to be vindicated, and he's now able to run again. So I think a lot of people were kind of expecting Donald Trump and versus Bernie Sanders, in 2019. People were expecting that to be the big fight between the left and the right. But I think the 2022 Brazilian election is set to be the ultimate social experiment, seeking to answer what I think is the most prominent question of this era in global politics. And that's, what are the answers to our economic problems? Is it this right-wing populism that has shown to have no actual or credible basis in fact, no actual and no results yielded, by the way, or is it this left-wing populism that has, whenever it's allowed to breathe, like it did under Lula, is strong and focused on a very compassionate approach and actually yields good results for the majority of people, and I want to get your opinion on like what this means, because it looks like now it's going to be Bolsonaro and Lula, and the Brazilian election is going to be kind of like a petri dish for a lot of people who've been paying attention to this, and I think it's going to have ramifications globally.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I will say that, the elections next year in Brazil are not going to be a walk in a park, because we're dealing with a very divisive electorate. You have folks who are still admirers of Lula and the Workers' Party, and folks who voted against Lula and are now becoming supportive, or who became supportive towards Bolsonaro because of anti-corruption and anti-establishment. But now COVID-19, how it struck Brazil, again, more than 275,000 people have died. That's one of the highest death tolls in the world, and one of the highest death tolls throughout the Americas. It's going to continue to split the electorate, because Brazil is a developing country. The establishment media has a lot of power there. And, there are a lot of forces that are beyond their control in certain cases. So, if Brazil's economy further tanks, it's going to be a tough race to call even further.
Right, and I think that one of the things, Benjamin Fogel, he wrote a piece in Jacobin about about Lula and what it means for Brazil, and one of the things he mentioned was Bolsonaro's COVID response and how that could potentially be something that buries him, and I think that, I think that Brazil, we could see that happen. That, I think, if there's anything that's going to bring down these right wing movements, I think it potentially could be the COVID responses that they've put out, because we saw with Donald Trump especially, one of the big reasons, and actually I think what buried his presidency was the COVID-19 crisis and his lack of ability to handle such a crisis. So I think that if COVID is still lingering, which I think it will, it's going to linger for a long time. I think much longer than we obviously first anticipated. But I think the COVID crisis in Brazil, and we have like 200,000 people dead now, I think, in Brazil, which is an astounding number. But I think that that's going to be the weak point for Bolsonaro, and that has hurt Brazil's economy. The only thing I think that Lula is going to have to battle in order to buck this trend of these right-wing movements globally is he's going to have to, one, call that out, but he also has to fight. The thing he also has to fight is the military, because we know Bolsonaro has kind of taken advantage of his role as a leading leader of the military. And that looming threat is also there, and we've seen, like, whether it be Bolivia or I believe Belarus, and a lot of places, there's been a lot of crackdowns by right-wing leaders. So that's like the one thing that does worry me. There's going to be smears. There's going to be more attacks against Lula, and that's to be expected. But I think my overall question for this, and I'm sorry, I've kind of all over the place with this, because it's something that I have a lot of thoughts about, is, what, in the end of the day, what do you think Lula represents? Because he has to fight all of this, and obviously we have to be in solidarity with him, but he has to fight all of this, the establishment, which is now Bolsonaro, and the popularity that he has, while also fending off these attacks. So if he's able to succeed against this machine, what does this example show us?
Well, I think it shows us that, there's still a lot of people power movements trying to reorganize and re-strengthen themselves throughout Brazil. This is the largest country by size and population and economy in all of South America. And, my hope is that what Lula went through, and he has succeeded, relatively speaking, being released from jail and these charges starting to drop, I hope it radicalizes him to the point that, we need radical social democracy. We need a radical progressive economy. We need serious reforms to their democracy, because if they ever want to become a developed country and a uh, geopolitical power of sorts, alongside the United States, China, India, Russia, France, the UK, you name it, there has to be serious fundamental changes to the economy and to the entire political institutions as well. Like I said, they're the richest country in South America, and yet what, 40 to 50% of the population is in serious poverty, especially those who are working of color, disabled, women, you name it. And so there needs to be a lot of radical solidarity and radical approaches, and be authentic and says, look, this is what I believe in, and this is what I'm going to fight for. And he also has to mobilize the Workers' Party, and may have to unify all the left-wing to far-left parties into one united front, maybe a coalition or a merger with the Workers' Party. I'm not entirely sure, but that's just my advice overall going forward.
Yeah, and we're gonna see, because like I said, the one thing that Lula is constantly gonna have to fight is the entire establishment, because much like we've seen in the United States, the establishment in almost any country does, for whatever reason, does not would like has to apparently choose between supporting these left-wing movements that have been proven to have ideas that are popular and that work, or fascism. And somehow that's always had, they've always felt like there's actually a decision to be made, like they have to choose between two evils, and when in reality one is proven to be evil and the other is proven to be effective and actually show compassion for for society. So again, like these are things we're going to talk about, and I think it's kind of like a good transition into our next topic. And Marcus, I do want to bring you into our next topic as well, because I know you have some ideas as well, and so let's get to it. So let's talk about the reports that came out in the Nevada Democratic Party. So Ryan Grimm of The Intercept did some wonderful reporting on what happened in Nevada. And on March 6th, basically, a coalition of progressive candidates backed by the local chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America won all of the leadership seats in the Nevada Democratic Party. They had an election like they do every few years, and the DSA bloc took all of the leadership seats in the Democratic Party. Now, they were running against the, quote, Progressive Unity bloc, which basically made up all of the moderate establishment characters who were funded by the Reid machine. Now, Nevada, of course, was a state that Bernie Sanders won handily, defeating all other challengers by a vast margin in the Democratic primary last year, and a lot of that was due to his outreach. A lot of that was due to his worker-centric message, and that has led to this transition in Nevada. Nevada was a state that was once a Republican stronghold to now being, I can't believe I'm saying this, like literally the first state to be run, or the first state to be run by, essentially now like Democratic Socialists. And what happened after, though, is the big story, because the unity and this progressive unity ticket, they ran on this idea that we're going to bring everyone together, we're going to unify, and we need to be a united Democratic Party. This was the progressive unity ticket, the part that was made up by the moderates, the part that was made up by the establishment. And as soon as the DSA members took all of the seats in leadership, the unity went right out the window, guys. And as we saw in the reporting by Ryan Grimm, Judith Whitmer, who is now the chair, she was a DSA member, who's now the chair of the Nevada Democratic Party and was elected to that position by Nevada Democratic voters, received an email from the executive director of the party. I believe her name is Alana Mounts. And the email said something to the effect of, congrats. And she said that, and, congratulating her on her new position right before letting her know that she, along with every single staff member in the Nevada Democratic Party, is going to resign. And prior to sending out that email, Mounts had made arrangements to give severance to all of the workers and all the employees who had quit as a reward for their service to the party. Also the establishment had prepared for this loss by moving around $450,000 out of the party budget into the DSCC, which is like that's like the funding arm of the Democratic Senate. So basically, they left them with little to no money, set them up with no staff or infrastructure, and the weird thing is this unity ticket. These moderates who talk about unity all the time are the same ones who, the second that the Democratic Socialists or anyone who's left of center gets power, they are the ones who end up hurting their own party because they choose to throw unity out the window and not even engage. And that's the problem I have, and it speaks to this, like I was talking about with Lula. It speaks to that idea that apparently they'd rather lose all power, and they'd rather lose to the right than they would work with the left. And that's like kind of my intro for that. And I do want to get your guys' opinions on just what happened in Nevada and just what happened with the Democratic Party. So either one of you guys can take it. Dwayne, why don't you take it?
All right. Well, I have to say, this has been the goal of a lot of progressive individuals and organizations like DSA or Our Revolution, Sunrise, folks within the labor movement for quite some time, especially before, during, and after Senator Sanders's first and second presidential primary campaigns. This is a very promising development of how progressives could take over the Democratic Party, especially at the state and local level, like what we see in Nevada, because there are a lot of working class people who have been struggling for years. And now with COVID-19, it is going to further worsen that particular struggle. And, it's an amazing transformation we've seen Nevada politically. It was pretty much a swing state, and now it's becoming much like a blue state, similar to how, Colorado and Virginia became blue states, because it's not just only longtime residents, especially folks of color, who are turning the state blue, but also folks from, California moving to Nevada, turning the state blue, or at least a competitive state from time to time. And so, it would be amazing to see if they run progressive candidates in swing districts and, other offices like school boards and county board of supervisors, especially in the major metropolitan areas of Las Vegas, Reno, and Carson City as well. And, I hope the labor unions fully support the new direction that the state Democratic Party is going in Nevada, because they were fundamental in ensuring that both Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden won the state in those presidential elections.
Yeah, but I mean, and I'm sorry, Marcus, I will get you in. I just want to make this point. Like the one thing we know though about the labor unions especially is the fact that like Harry Reid is no friend of the left. He's no friend of like people like the DSA or Bernie Sanders. He ran essentially smear campaigns along with the unions against him in 2020, and we saw like the backing that Hillary Clinton had from that Democratic machine that was built up by Harry Reid. And this isn't like a bash on Harry Reid. He obviously built an institution for the Democratic Party to actually be able to run in that state, but it's just I just don't know. I mean, like Marcus, my big question that just is in my mind. It's weird because I have this all the time. Whenever like something like this happens, when there's smears or whenever like just these setups happen from the moderates, is like can we even work with these people? How can we literally in good faith even attempt to work with people who don't even see us as people who are worth engaging with. Like, yeah, just take it from there.
Absolutely. I think it's a very important question to have. Where does an actual Democrat fall in place? Because Harry Reid and his type of Democrat, they're not really Democrats. They're more of a, hey, we want to be Democrats in name, but we want the policies, the corporate policies of Republicans. That's what they're going for, right? So when you in Nevada, it's a very interesting situation because Bernie had the groundwork that led to the takeover, right? Bernie put in all of the work, right? He put in the groundwork. He got the fundraising. He got the grassroots energy, and he took it over. And I think that's what we need to aim for across the country, right? If we want to see progressive policies, we need to make Democratic Party institutions. We got to turn them progressive, right? We need to make sure that we do this across the country, and I think we're going to see a higher caliber of progressive come out of Nevada now, right?
Yeah.
Before the leaning was, hey, let's go towards someone who will be for sure a Harry Reid guy, right? The Harry Reid was behind the scene, orchestrating the entire thing, right? Now we got progressives who are in the orchestrating role, right? I don't think they're going to be as maniacal as Harry Reid was, to put it bluntly, right? But I think at the end of the day, progressives have the power in that state. I think we're going to get more progressive candidates, right? And I think that's an overall good thing. But at the end of the day, we're talking about perhaps 2 Senate seats, for representative seats, right? That's what Nevada is.
I think so.
We're not going to see a large amount of change. What we're going to see is that Nevada is going to change, and that's another thing, right? This is the chance for Nevada to be the standard bearer for what progressives can do in a state. Nevada has to do the things that progressives want, right? Nevada has to institute a $15 minimum wage. Nevada has to have a healthcare system. They have to do it. They have to go for it, right? If the federal government's not doing it, progressives got to do it in their state. And I think Nevada is going to be a good example of making sure that progressive priorities are enacted. Decriminalization of drugs, criminal justice reform, all of these things. Nevada is in the perfect prime spot to show that progressives, one, can get elected, right? And two, they can enact progressive change without breaking the entire state. Because right now there's a lot of Republicans who say, well, if progressives run the state, it's just gonna go bankrupt because money. But we gotta prove this right.
Yeah.
As this, there's I'll pass it off to someone else, but there's a common saying that states are laboratories for democracy. We have a system where states have a lot of freedoms. And if you go, in the provincial system like you have in Canada and where you have provinces, the federal government has a lot more power. But in America, each state can decide issues for themselves. And this is a prime example where progressives have a lot of power, and they got to be that laboratory for these issues. And I think that it's an exciting time to be progressive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt. So the thing is, I was excited to see this because I do think Nevada can be a model of a progressive state, and I think that's a good thing. But what worries me is kind of like what I've been saying throughout this conversation, and that is that with the democratic institution that was in place before, and that now obviously has been elected out. My worry is, you see things like the Democratic Party taking away funding. You see things like the literally they have no staff now. So it's literally undercutting them before they have a chance to even start. And I think that's probably going to lead to some growing pains along this process and could even hurt the left-wing movement. And I think that's what the intention is, obviously, by these agents. And so, while yes, I'm excited about this, it's just this constant doubt in my mind that no matter what we do, we're always going to have to fight 10 times harder. And it's not even just because we're fighting from a place of weakness, kind of the bottom up. It's literally because the establishment does not feel like they can or should engage with us.
And
And
I think I did a politician answer where I didn't really answer your question. To answer your question specifically, right? You know, this is the establishment's never going to be on the side of progressives, right? We gotta, as Marco Rubio would say, we need to dispel the notion that the establishment cares about progressives. The establishment doesn't care about progressives, and what we need to do is, as progressives, we need to we got to put our money where our mouth is, right? Like we should go donate $27 to the progressives out in Nevada, right? We need to rebuild their war fund. And honestly, I don't think Nevadans are, I hope that's the word for it. Every state has IEAN or whatever. I hope that's Nevadans because that would make the most sense.
I think it's Nevadans.
Perfect. So Nevadans need to go out there, right? And they got to show their displeasure, right? What they did was they disassembled their own Democratic Party. That's what the establishment did. And that's unacceptable. Whether you have disagreements for whoever's in charge, these progressives were donating to that party, right? These progressives were putting in. And you're going to take it out because you're not in charge anymore? Nah, that's false unity, right? That's not unity. And, I think that's why AOC and progressives who are a little bit more willing to work with the establishment, that's why they get a lot of heat. Because the establishment doesn't care about getting things done. Progressives want to get things done. The establishment could care less, right? But for us to get things done, we have to work with these numbskulls, to some degree, right? We got to work with them if we want anything to get done. And then that's the conundrum. That's the big question that your question really is poking at, right? It's how do we get things done when the establishment has so much power and we still, we need them to get things done. Luckily in Nevada, we solved that problem by just getting rid of them. Is that reasonable on the national level? Probably not. But, let's hit it one state at a time and see what happens. That's what I'm going to say.
I think that's a good point. And like, yeah, I think you remember one of our mutual friends asked me about, like, I had made some comments last week about AOC and her place and kind of her strategy. And I made a note that I disagree. I agree with her beliefs. I think AOC's beliefs, AOC's intentions are 100% in the right place and honestly align like 90% with mine. The part that I disagreed with her about was, I think, more so her strategy. And obviously I'm not in Congress. I don't know what's happening behind closed doors. I probably won't for a long time. But from the outside looking in, the arguments, I think, or the perception amongst a lot of people on the left, and I think rightfully so, is that the progressives that are in power right now, aside from maybe like Bernie Sanders, they're not fighting the establishment as hard as they probably should be, because the reality is the establishment is going to be fighting them every single step of the way. So at some point, I think it's this feeling of you need to push back. You need to push back at some point. And you need to find ways to galvanize the base. And what galvanizes the base of progressives? It's issues like Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage. And I understand this COVID bill was necessary and that's fine, and you don't want to rock the boat, but it's passed. Right now, we should be releasing statements. We need to be on the attack. Like, that's just the truth of the matter. You want to get the base ready. You want to get that fundraising machine going. You want to do all of that. Let's get them riled up and tell them, Kirsten Sinema, Joe Manchin, Chris Coons, Gene Shaheen, all those people who voted against that procedural vote for the $15 minimum wage, call them out on the record, on the House floor, wherever you got, in interviews, wherever you can. Call them out and say, these members are the reason you don't have a $15 minimum wage in this country, or we're not even working towards that right now. Call out people who are publicly against, Democrats like Henry Cuellar, who are publicly against Medicare for all. Call them out. I think it's this lack of the reason that you see people like Jimmy Dore getting clout amongst a lot of the left is because they don't see that type of stuff, and they really want to see it, because the perception is, and the reality, quite frankly, is that we are never going to get get things done our way. We're never going to get our policies in the forefront. We're never going to get our people ready to fight even more, and I'm figuratively fight, unless we attack them just as hard as they're going to attack us in the press, in the messaging, and everything.
I don't think it's that simple.
I'm not trying to simplify
absolutely
it.
not.
I'm just saying the reality.
And I don't think you are, but I think there's, I am pretty much I'm in the camp of AOC, right? On the federal level, you're not going to get much done. The best thing you can do is make sure the Democrats stay in power, because when Republicans get in power, things get a lot more messed up. Look at the Supreme Court. And that's coming from a guy who didn't really care for Clinton. I'm not going to say what happened I'm not going to say what I did on 2016. It wasn't vote for Trump, but it wasn't vote for Clinton either. That's where I'm from, right? But I learned that, the Supreme Court matters. These federal issues matter, and it's important to keep Democrats in power. But that doesn't mean that we don't, look at AOC. What she's done, she's gone to Texas, right? I think AOC going to Texas is going to get us 2 more seats next election,
Yeah, it could.
depending on what happened. I think that's probable, right? And I think that really the thing that we want is things like Nevada, right? Where we take it over. Because that's the only way it's going to happen. And I know Dwayne hasn't said much. I'd like to get Dwayne's opinion on this before I filibuster.
I was literally just about to be like, Dwayne, you want to take your finger off the mute button, man? Let's go.
Yeah, well, all I have to say is, definitely we need accountability with the progressive organizations and individuals that we supported, we voted for, we donated. But, Marcus is right, is that, we have to act locally or in our backyards. I mean, for example, here in California, even though our state executives are Democrats, the state legislature is Democratic majority, the major cities are Democratic majority, our Supreme Court is fairly liberal compared to, let's say, the Supreme Court of Montana or Alaska. We have a serious environmental crisis. In fact, we're permitting more inland oil and natural gas exploration. We have a housing crisis where we can't even reform zoning because of not in my backyard, folks. Our public education system is deeply segregated in the most ethnically and racially diverse state in the country. And, election day is on a public holiday, or special elections are not held during the weekends. And it's like, we have a majority, and a lot of it is backed by labor unions and liberal progressive groups. So there needs to be accountability with individuals and those organizations, so we can push, these state legislators and hopefully Congress to these directions, or it's going to be deja vu with the Democratic Party up and down nationwide.
Yeah, and one final note I want to make before we go to break, because I know we're a little bit slow on time, but I want to make the note, and I think it's important, guys, to from a messaging standpoint and just on reality standpoint. I think whenever we're talking about stuff like this, like the election in Nevada, we shouldn't necessarily call it a takeover or take control, because that's the headlines that are from MSNBC and all those people. We should say the truth, and the truth is the truth is they were rightfully elected. They were elected to these positions by the people, because that gives them more legitimacy than a takeover. That puts them in with the popularity of the voters. So I think that's an important thing personally for me that I try to make a note of and try to do in my daily life. So. But we'll see. Hopefully, we won't have this type of stuff happen in the future. But that's to be determined. That's why we fight. We're gonna take another quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna have some fun. We got some clips to watch. We're gonna hear from our good friend Tucker Carlson and the Democrats and Tucker Carlson's friend Newt Gingrich is gonna be joining too. So we'll see what happens with that. Confused face.
we're back.
We are back. Yeah. That short commercial break, limited commercial interruptions, brought to you by the Nevada DNC. Let's take it, guys. We got some fun video clips to show here. First, Newt Gingrich was on Tucker Carlson to spout a lot of BS about the Biden and the left, and just play the clip. This is something.
Yeah, I mean, I just did a tweet this afternoon saying if there's a problem with COVID in Texas, it's not Governor Abbott, it's Biden's illegals. I mean, we just had to call them. These are Biden's illegals coming in the country, no public health check. I mean, even back in the 1880s, we had public health.
Because illegal immigration totally started with Joe Biden and never happened before. they totally started with Joe Biden. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Continue.
that's wild.
Checks. Oh yeah. If you came to America, but here's Tucker. I really admire your show. I really think you're remarkably trenchant in your insights. But I just want to offer you a thought. They don't want to protect your America. Yeah. They want to create an alternative America. It's an America of racial, deep inequality in an anti-white and, by the way, anti-Asian basis. It's an America in which transgender dominates Christianity and Judaism. It's an America in which they want to actually pass a bill to create a permanent machine, just like California, Chicago, and New York. And that's not, so when you and I talk about why would they do this for America, it's because they really want a radically different country. And they really, as I just proved with Dr. Seuss, they really despise America.
Man, that's not democracy as we've defined it at all. And
Oh, the balls, dude, the balls on Newt Gingrich to go on national television and say all of that. He was in rare form. So many gems. Just so many gems in those like 30 seconds. But look, first of all, guys, I think we can all agree that if anyone is guilty of spewing anti-Asian rhetoric, it's definitely the right and Newt Gingrich's party in the past year. And just I love how he went through his like little checklist, you know? There was like, oh, this anti-white rhetoric, transgender, just throwing words like, oh, transgenders want to eliminate Christianity and Judaism. Like Dr. Seuss, he was literally reading off talking points. That's all it was.
It was a list of segments on Fox News from right before he got on.
Oh man.
And let's not forget that Newt Gingrich is, not just was only Speaker of the House, but was one of the most prominent Republicans that started this polarization and obstructionism that we kind of see today with the Republican Party. Like when they swept in the 1990s during the Clinton administration, they said, we're not going to work with Bill Clinton on anything he wants. He kind of has to listen to us, and this is what we demand. And we saw it with the Tea Party, and now we're seeing it again with the Republican opposition now that they're no longer in the majority for now. So it's like, it's no surprise. I mean, this is the same guy who wanted to make the moon the 51st state.
That's the most American thing I've ever heard in my life. Make the moon the 51st state. Oh, God. Look, Newt Gingrich, terrible human being, terrible politician, amazing meme though. But it's like literally, how do you say that kind of stuff? You can only say that on like Tucker Carlson tonight. What I love though about Tucker Carlson's show is just the constant confused look on his face that he has. It's literally just like he's trying to understand. He's like, oh, well, that's I understand that, but he's just like he legitimately looks like he doesn't comprehend what the other person's saying. It's just mass confusion. And honestly, if I was on a late night Fox News show, I'd probably be a little confused too.
Well, no, it's like how straight his face is. Like every part of his face is like completely straight, like his eyebrows, and then like his mouth. I am Tucker Carlson. Hear me roar. It's like he wants it to be like on like 100%, like 180 degrees. Okay, let's do my Tucker Carlson angles.
Love it, man. And all the people on the left, like I know there's like there's weird because Carlson has like a bunch of people on the left who say that, oh well, Tucker Carlson's like the definition of a good right wing populist, and I'm just like, no, that's not in any way true. Tucker Carlson is like a neo-conservative who poses as this, and I don't even.
Well, he's
want
a
to call it,
FA. He's a FA populist.
He's
Or
a
a
FA
Fox populist.
Fox populist. He's a Foxulist. Yeah, but like he's it's weird because like the whole idea of like right wing populism and like there being a good right wing populism. I don't even think the ideology really exists, to be honest. Like the only person I can point to and say is like, oh, that's someone who's right wing or right leaning and a populist that I actually can have a conversation with or actually like kind of agree with on some points is someone like Tiger and Jetty from The Hill. Because and I think that's like that's a brand of like populism or a brand of the right wing that just hasn't caught up, I think, with a lot of mainstream America.
Wait, he's a right winger?
Yeah, he's a right winger.
Really?
He's conservative. He's a
Couldn't
conservative.
even tell.
Like, see, that's the thing though. And I'm sure we'll talk about Sagar and his beliefs because his is interesting. But a lot of people like to lump him in with the Tucker Carlsons and like and Trumps, and I'm like, that's not true. I just think that his brand of populism just isn't like it just doesn't represent enough of a chunk of America at all. It's like a new kind of thing to really that we can really identify it. So that's the thing. But Carlson's terrible. All right. Last thing of today, courtesy of Case Study QB on Twitter. Give him a follow, guys. Here is Ali Velshi on MSNBC telling us what one Republican lawmaker from Arizona believes about voting and people's rights to vote or not. Let's take a listen.
The Republicans do have one policy idea around which they have united: stopping people from voting. Not all people, some people. And many have tried to claim the motive behind this is stopping voter fraud, even though voter fraud is actually virtually non-existent in America. But in Arizona, where Republicans have put forward more than 20 bills against voting, one Republican may have revealed the real motive. Arizona State Representative John Kavanaugh said, quote, "There's a fundamental difference between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats value as many people voting as possible. Republicans are more concerned about fraud, so we don't mind putting security measures in that won't let everybody vote. But everybody shouldn't be voting," end quote. Say what? Who exactly shouldn't be voting, you ask? Well, fortunately, he answers, quote, "Not everybody wants to vote, and if somebody is uninterested in voting, that probably means that they're totally uninformed on the issues. Quantity is important, but we have to look at the quality of votes as well," end quote. The quality of...
Marcus, I know you and I have had discussions with people who actually believe what that crazy Republican lawmaker believes. And these are the same people who cry about liberty and people's rights. But when it comes to your right to vote, they always seem to have an excuse to suppress the vote and openly express their pleasure for voter suppression. So, guys, I want to get your reaction to this.
Oh, it's absolutely just maddening, right? Just like that's the instinct to say, because that is a thing in conservative culture, right? Because for so long, America has been a certain way, and the people who made it that way, right, mostly white, mostly male, and that's the culture of who used to be able to vote, right? Until 1860, black people couldn't vote, people of color couldn't vote, right? And then until the 1900s, what was it, 1919, right? It was pretty.
Yep.
19
women.
Yeah, women. But there's a bunch of people who want to go back to that original list, like that checklist, right? Oh, you're white, you're male, you own land, okay, you can vote. Throw off land. Some people are. I'm sure there's people who want to go back to just land, right? But that's a common thing in conservatism, right? It's what groups do I fall in? How can I make America better for my own groups, right? That's a common thing in conservatism, and and those same people will be like yelling, hey, I want America to be this, or I want America to have values, or I want America to be, why are these people, they have different ideas than the conservative way? Why are they allowed in America? They should go to another country that's not America, right? But no, they don't realize that America is not just their own individual group. America is all of us. And
Right.
we need to have ideals, right? We need to have ideals that stress that we are open to all, because that's in e pluribus unum, right? It's on our money. In many, one, we are all one people, and that's maybe back in the 1700s it was just men who owned land and were white, right? But no, we've realized and we've evolved, and this is what we are now, right? So if you want America, you want our values, right? You can't just pick your values and say that this is what America is. No, it's all of our values coming together and accepting all of the different values and putting them together peacefully, effectively, and efficiently. That's what America needs to be. That's what progressives want America to be. And that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and Dwayne, I'm gonna let you get in for a second, but like it's just what he said, what this lawmaker said, it just points to this hypocrisy from this conservative ideology, because you made a very well articulated argument, Marcus, about the reasons why they say this kind of stuff, and the reason, and kind of like the underlying reasons why they believe what they believe. But I think on a face level, it just points to hypocrisy, because these are the same people who say that we don't want a tyrannical regime. We don't want a regime that is not legitimate. We don't want a regime that's going to flex their power unrightfully, unjustly over people and take away liberties. When in fact, it's the same people who do that are the same people who are willing to admit now, apparently, that they would undermine elected processes. They would take away people's rights to vote just to get their policies that apparently aren't in the majority anymore in power, to get those policies across and to get those in power and in place unjustly. That is the definition of tyranny. That is a perfect example of what tyranny looks like. And these are the same people who say, oh, we're fighting tyranny. We're fighting. No, you're not. You're suppressing the vote. If you really want to be in power, make your ideas better. Update them for the 21st century. Because I'm telling you, and I'm speaking to one person specifically that Marcus, you and I both know, I won't name, but you are the future of the Republican Party, and you can mold it. And you want to mold the conservative movement into something good and worthwhile, then by all means do it. But right now, the stuff that people like you are saying, the stuff that this gentleman from Arizona just said, it's gonna kill the conservative movement in America. I'm telling you. And like, look, I'm someone, I don't even like, I disagree with everything that conservative values believe in, right? I'm extremely left, right? But at the same time, it's just, I'm looking at this just from a strategic standpoint, and it just reeks of hypocrisy, and it's gonna end up being an ideology that dies out. Over time, it's just going to get less and less popular, and it's going to die out unless they adapt.
Well, all I have to say is, voter restriction and voter suppression is not new. Between 2009 up until really the 2020 elections, as Republicans gain majorities in the state legislators and the state executives and the state Supreme Courts, and you name it, they've been restricting the vote, whether it's reducing early voting, polling locations, strict voter ID laws. And, this has been in the making for years. Even Paul Weyrich, who is the co-founder of the Heritage Foundation, he said this back in the 1980s in front of the religious right and a group of organizations with the religious right. He said, quote, "They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They have never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections is quite candidly goes up as the voting populace goes down." So they're all basically saying we don't want people of color, poor people,
Right.
and liberal, progressive-minded people or folks who are against their policies or ideologies or parties overall not to vote, or not to vote in higher numbers like what we saw in 2020, relatively speaking. This is, quite frankly, apartheid, in my opinion. This is what we saw in the Jim Crow South. This is what we saw in apartheid South Africa. The British Conservative Party is slowly attempting voter ID laws in their own country. I haven't heard any news about that, but they're going to learn from the American system. Like, if America can do it, why can't we? And, the thing about voter ID laws, if people are so concerned about voter ID verification, why don't we have a national ID system like most countries? Why do I need to renew my driver's license with this one ID patch on it, which is ridiculous? And it's it's just subliminal racism. I hate to say it. They just want to keep white folks in power with these.
It's not even subliminal. It's overt. It's overt. At this point, we know enough information that's overt. Any last words, guys, on this or anything else we've talked about today? We've had a wonderful show, by the way. This has been a really good show.
I guess that's about it. And don't forget about daylight savings time.
Wait, is that this weekend?
I think it's tomorrow.
I could have.
Shit.
Oh, I thought it was next week. Oh, thanks, Dwayne. Wait,
huge thanks.
I'm gonna pull up calendar. Is it? I can't. Oh, wait, no. It's someone's birthday. Oh, an invitation. Oh, okay. But
yes, tomorrow on the 14th of March.
Holy smokes! Hey, that's Pi Day too, right?
Oh.
Yeah.
3.14. Yeah, everybody.
Oh,
it's Pi Day.
Small world.
Everyone, get a good pie tomorrow. I'm gonna make a pie.
Yeah, dude, get a good pie. Shout out to our friend Joey who finally got
Joey
pie.
Loves pie, man.
He loves pie.
Oh man.
And you know what I love, guys?
He likes to have two different pies. Like he like blueberry and cherry at the same time, or something like that. Two different pies.
We are yep. We all love pie. Everyone here loves pie. And you know what else I love, guys? I love the fact that I can come here every week, same time, same place. Omer Hughes Show, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Pacific. I have wonderful conversations like this with people of a lot of different backgrounds who might agree with me. Marcus disagrees with me on some things. I disagree with Dwayne on some things. It's okay because we're all here just to have an open forum, talk, and hopefully inform anyone who's watching. So thank you guys for being here. Dwayne, as always, it's a pleasure. Marcus, you are amazing. And thank you for everyone who has watched. Remember to follow us at OQ News. Now we have rebranded OQ News on Facebook. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, patreon.com/OQ Politics. Check out the podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts. And we will see you same time, same place next week.